they mocked my environmental degree. Until I seized their factory for clean water violations. Revenge with Jan. Before I tell you how I shut down a $200 million manufacturing facility and sent its executives to federal prison, I need you to understand something. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it's scientific. And sometimes it comes in the form of a court order that locks the gates of an empire built on poisoned water. My name is Dr. Adrian Cross. I have a PhD in environmental chemistry, and the corporate executives who called my degree tree-hugging bullshit learned the hard way that expertise isn't weakness, it's ammunition. This is the story of how I turned their mockery into a federal case, their arrogance into evidence, and their factory into a crime scene. The Crosstech Industrial Solutions facility sat on the outskirts of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, like a monument to old manufacturing money. 70 acres of concrete, steel, and chemical storage tanks. 3,000 employees. Revenue approaching $250 million annually. My father, Warren Cross, had built it from nothing over 40 years. Started as a small electroplating operation in the 1970s, expanded into industrial coatings, metal treatments, specialized chemical processing. By the time I was born in 1985, Crosstech was the largest employer in 3 counties. I grew up in that factory, summer jobs starting at 16, learning the production lines, the chemistry, the business operations. My older brother Garrett was groomed to take over operations. My younger sister Helena was being positioned for finance. And I was supposed to be the chief technical officer, the science guy who kept the processes running efficiently. But somewhere between high school and college, I developed what my father called a problem with authority. I started noticing things. The way wastewater treatment was always the first budget to get cut. The way environmental compliance was treated as an inconvenience rather than a responsibility. The way my father would joke about creative interpretations of EPA regulations. At 19, during a summer internship in 2004, I discovered that our wastewater discharge was exceeding permitted chromium levels by 340%. I reported it to my father privately, expecting him to fix it. He laughed, actually laughed. Adrian, son, those limits are suggestions. The EPA doesn't have the manpower to monitor everyone. As long as we file the right paperwork and don't poison anyone visibly, we're fine. But the chromium is going into Clearwater Creek, I said. People fish there, kids swim there. And they've been doing it for 30 years without problems, he replied. Don't be dramatic. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being accurate. But accuracy didn't matter in a family business where profit margins trumped pollution limits. I made a decision that summer. I wouldn't join Crosstech as an employee. I'd study it as an adversary. I enrolled at Cornell in 2005, majoring in environmental engineering. My father thought it was a phase. Good background for technical operations, he said. You'll understand the regulations better when you're running compliance. He didn't understand that I wasn't studying regulations to avoid them, and I was studying them to weaponize them. I graduated in 2009 with honors. Then I went straight into a PhD program at MIT, specializing in industrial water chemistry and regulatory enforcement mechanisms. My family thought I'd lost my mind. 7 years of school to be a glorified water tester, Garrett scoffed during Christmas 2010. You could have been running our technical division by now. Environmental science isn't a real career, Helena added. It's what people do when they can't handle real business. My father was more direct. At Thanksgiving 2012, with my dissertation nearly complete, he made his position clear. "I've held a position open for you for 7 years," Warren said, his voice sharp with disappointment. "Chief Technical Officer, $180,000 starting salary, real responsibility, real impact. Instead, you're writing a 1,000-page thesis about water molecules that no one will ever read. It's about industrial effluent contamination patterns in post-industrial watersheds," I corrected. "And people will read it. Regulatory agencies, environmental lawyers, compliance officers." "Tree huggers," he interrupted. "You've spent 7 years becoming qualified to work for tree huggers. Do you understand how embarrassing that is? I built this company for my children, and one of them wants to join the enemy." "I'm not the enemy, Dad. I'm trying to make sure companies operate responsibly." "Companies like mine?" "Companies like yours," I confirmed. He stood up from the table. "Then don't expect a place here. When you're done playing environmental crusader and you're ready to join the real world, maybe we'll talk. Until then, consider that position filled." He walked out. My mother followed him. Garrett smirked at me. Helena shook her head like I was a lost cause. I finished my PhD in May 2013. My dissertation was titled "Systematic Analysis of Heavy Metal Contamination in Mid-Atlantic Watersheds," a case study of industrial discharge compliance failures. Crosstech Industrial Solutions was mentioned 14 times. Not by name. I'd changed identifying details for legal reasons. But anyone familiar with Millbrook would recognize the patterns. My father didn't attend my graduation. Neither did Garrett or Helena. I didn't care anymore. I had something more valuable than their approval. I had expertise, and I was about to put it to use. After graduation in 2013, I took a position with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's Water Quality Division, entry-level field inspector, $52,000 a year. My family found this hilarious. From MIT PhD to government drone, Garrett texted me. "Dad's right. You wasted 7 years." What they didn't understand was that field inspector wasn't my end goal. It was my access point. Pennsylvania's environmental regulations are labyrinthine. Deliberately so. Industrial lobbyists had spent decades making the rules complex enough that most companies could exploit loopholes while maintaining technical compliance. But complexity cuts both ways. If you understand the system deeply enough, you can use that same complexity as a weapon. I spent 18 months, from mid-2013 through late 2014, learning every regulation, every loophole, and every enforcement mechanism. I studied which violations triggered fines versus which triggered facility shutdowns. I learned which agencies had overlapping jurisdiction and how to coordinate multi-agency actions. I became an expert in the exact system Crosstech had been gaming for decades. And then I started watching them. Not officially. I wasn't assigned to monitor Crosstech. That would have been a conflict of interest. But environmental data is largely public record. Discharge reports, compliance filings, water quality samples from downstream monitoring stations. I started analyzing Crosstech's public data in my free time, late 2014 into 2015. And what I found was exactly what I'd suspected since I was 19. Systematic, deliberate, ongoing violations. Their chromium discharge hadn't improved since 2004. It had gotten worse. The current levels were exceeding permitted limits by 420%. Their pH levels in wastewater discharge were consistently outside acceptable ranges, indicating they were dumping untreated acidic waste. Their self-reported monitoring data showed impossible consistency, numbers that were mathematically unlikely to occur naturally, suggesting they were fabricating reports. But none of this was enough for enforcement action. Companies are allowed to self-report. Regulators are understaffed. Unless there's a visible environmental disaster, a fish kill, a contaminated drinking water supply. These violations are typically handled with warning letters and small fines. Crosstech had been paying those fines for years. Cost of doing business. Cheaper than actually fixing the problems. I needed something bigger, something undeniable, and something that would trigger emergency enforcement authority. So in early 2015, I started building a real case. Not as a DEP inspector, I was careful to keep my official work separate. This was personal research conducted on my own time, using publicly available data and private analysis. I purchased professional-grade water testing equipment, spent $8,000 of my own money on a portable mass spectrometer, dissolved oxygen meters, heavy metal test kits. Then I started sampling Clearwater Creek downstream from Crosstech's discharge point. Weekly samples, taken at consistent times, properly documented, GPS tagged, photographed. I wasn't trespassing, wasn't stealing samples, just collecting publicly accessible water from a public waterway. The results were damning. Chromium levels, 850% above safe drinking water standards. Lead, 340% above limits. Cadmium, detectable at levels that shouldn't exist in natural water. pH levels, fluctuating wildly, consistent with periodic dumping of untreated industrial waste. But here's what made it explosive. The contamination pattern showed Crosstech wasn't just exceeding their permitted discharge limits. They were bypassing their treatment system entirely during off-peak hours. I'd suspected this since 2004. Now I had proof. Proving systematic discharge violations required more than water samples. I needed to document the physical infrastructure they were using to bypass treatment systems. This is where my childhood familiarity with the facility became an asset. Crosstech's property borders state forest land on two sides. Public hiking trails run within a quarter-mile of their northern boundary. Perfectly legal to be there. Perfectly legal to observe what was visible from public land. In April 2015, I started hiking those trails with a camera. Long-range lens. Thermal imaging attachment. I wasn't trespassing. Wasn't violating any privacy laws. Just documenting what was visible from public property. It took 3 weeks of observation to spot it. A discharge pipe that wasn't on any of Crosstech's official site maps. The pipe emerged from the ground about 200 yards north of the main treatment facility, ran through a culvert under an access road, and emptied into a drainage ditch that fed directly into Clearwater Creek. The pipe was actively flowing during off-peak hours, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., when the main treatment facility's discharge was supposedly minimal. I set up trail cameras, motion activated, night vision capable. I positioned to capture the discharge pipe from public land. Over the next month, May into June 2015, those cameras captured hundreds of hours of footage showing consistent nighttime discharge from the unauthorized pipe. But footage wasn't enough. I needed chemical confirmation that this discharge was untreated industrial waste. So I started midnight sampling trips, hiking in with my portable testing equipment, collecting water samples directly from the unauthorized discharge during active flow periods. The results were catastrophic. The water coming from that pipe wasn't just contaminated. It was essentially raw industrial waste. Chromium levels 2,000% above safe limits. pH of 3.2. Acidic enough to burn skin. Heavy metal concentrations that would kill aquatic life on contact. Crosstech had built an entire shadow discharge system specifically to dump their most toxic waste when no one was watching. I documented everything. GPS coordinates, timestamps, chemical analysis, photographic evidence, chain of custody documentation for every sample. By July 2015, I had a case file that would have made a federal prosecutor weep with joy. But I didn't take it to prosecutors. Not yet. I took it to the media. In August 2015, I contacted Emily Harrison, an investigative journalist with the Philadelphia Inquirer who specialized in environmental stories. I sent her my entire case file anonymously through a secure drop. The story ran on September 12, 2015. Front page. Major P. A. Manufacturer accused of systematic water contamination. The article detailed everything. The unauthorized discharge pipe, the chemical testing results, the photographic evidence, the years of falsified compliance reports. Crosstech was named explicitly. My family was quoted extensively, denying everything. These allegations are completely baseless, my father told reporters. Crosstech has been a responsible corporate citizen for over 40 years. We comply fully with all environmental regulations. Garrett, now VP of Operations, was more aggressive. This is clearly an attack from environmental extremists who don't understand industrial operations. Our facility is regularly inspected and has passed every review. The DEP was forced to respond. They announced a formal investigation within 48 hours of the article's publication. And that's when my family discovered who'd provided the evidence. My father called me. First time we'd spoken in over a year. You did this. Not a question. An accusation. I documented violations, I replied calmly. That's all. You sabotaged your own family's business. Do you understand what you've done? We could lose everything because you wanted to play environmental vigilante. You've been poisoning a public waterway for decades. If you lose the business, it's because you chose profit over public health. This is about the PhD, isn't it? His voice was shaking with rage. You couldn't handle that I didn't worship your fancy degree, so you decided to destroy what I built. This is about chromium levels that are literally killing the ecosystem. But yes, Dad, my fancy degree is what gave me the expertise to prove it. You're not my son anymore. Good. Then you won't mind when I testify against you. He hung up. Helena sent me a text within minutes. You're dead to this family. Garrett was more creative. He posted on social media. When jealousy and failure combine, family betrayal follows. My brother chose trees over blood. I didn't respond to any of them. I was too busy preparing for the next phase. The DEP investigation began in late September 2015 with a routine facility inspection. Crosstech had been through dozens of these over the years. They knew how to perform for inspectors. But this time was different. This time, the inspection was unannounced. This time, it included representatives from the EPA's Criminal Enforcement Division. And this time, the inspectors knew exactly what to look for. The unauthorized discharge pipe was discovered within 2 hours of the inspection beginning. Crosstech couldn't deny its existence. It was physically there, actively flowing, clearly connected to their treatment system bypass. My father tried anyway. That's a stormwater drainage pipe, he claimed. It's been there for decades, completely permitted. The inspector, a woman named Catherine Wells, just smiled. Mr. Cross, stormwater drainage pipes don't carry chromium concentrations of 15,000 parts per million. This is industrial discharge, and it's not on any of your permit applications. There must be some contamination from... Sir, we've already collected samples. We've already analyzed them. This is raw industrial effluent being discharged directly into a protected waterway. That's a criminal violation of the Clean Water Act. The inspection lasted 3 days. By the time it concluded on September 29th, 2015, Crosstech had been issued. 47 notices of violation, 12 cease and desist orders for specific processes, 3 criminal referrals to federal prosecutors, 1 emergency restriction order limiting their discharge to 20% of normal capacity. The facility didn't shut down completely, not yet, but the restrictions crippled their production capacity. Stock price dropped 35% in 1 week. Major clients started cancelling contracts. The board of directors demanded answers. My father blamed me publicly, gave an interview to a business journal claiming I was a disgruntled family member with an axe to grind, who'd fabricated evidence to destroy the family business. That was a mistake. Accusing a federal witness of fabricating evidence is grounds for defamation. More importantly, and it's grounds for federal prosecutors to get very interested in why you're so defensive. In October 2015, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania opened a criminal investigation into Crosstech Industrial Solutions. I was contacted by Assistant U.S. Attorney James Reeves in early November. We met at a federal building in Philadelphia. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the focused intensity of someone who genuinely cared about the cases he prosecuted. "Dr. Cross, I've read your dissertation," he began, "and I've reviewed your evidence file. This is one of the most thoroughly documented environmental crime cases I've seen in 15 years of prosecution. Thank you. I need to ask you something directly. Your father claims you fabricated this evidence out of family spite. Is there any truth to that claim? Every sample I collected has a documented chain of custody. Every photograph is GPS tagged and time-stamped. Every chemical analysis was conducted using calibrated, certified equipment. I'm happy to testify under oath about my methodology. You understand that if you testify, your family will never forgive you. They disowned me 2 months ago. I have nothing left to lose and a lot of contaminated water to account for." James smiled. "Then let's build a case." Over the next 4 months, from November 2015 through February 2016, I worked with federal prosecutors to document the full scope of Crosstech's violations. We subpoenaed internal documents, emails showing executives discussing how to minimize compliance costs, and memos from my father instructing engineers to find creative solutions to waste disposal problems, financial records showing they'd saved over $8 million in treatment costs by using the unauthorized discharge pipe. We deposed employees. Several confirmed they'd been ordered to falsify monitoring reports. One engineer admitted he'd personally designed the bypass system in 2003 at my father's direction. We brought in environmental consultants who confirmed the contamination had caused measurable harm to the local ecosystem. Fish populations had declined 78% in affected sections of Clearwater Creek. Benthic invertebrate diversity was nearly zero. Sediment samples showed heavy metal accumulation that would persist for decades. The evidence was overwhelming. Crosstech had systematically, deliberately, and profitably violated environmental law for at least 12 years. In March 2016, federal prosecutors filed formal charges. 23 counts of criminal violations of the Clean Water Act, 15 counts of falsifying federal compliance documents, 8 counts of conspiracy to commit environmental crimes, 3 counts of obstruction of justice for lying to initial inspectors. Named defendants: Warren Cross, CEO, Garrett Cross, VP of Operations, Helena Cross, CFO, for approving budgets that funded the bypass system, and 3 senior engineers. The indictment sought $45 million in fines and up to 15 years in prison for the executive defendants. But the real weapon wasn't the criminal charges. It was the civil enforcement action filed simultaneously by the EPA. Criminal cases take years to prosecute. Environmental remediation can't wait that long. So in March 2016, simultaneous with the criminal indictment, the EPA filed an emergency civil action under Section 504 of the Clean Water Act. The filing argued that Crosstech Industrial Solutions represented an imminent and substantial endangerment to public health and the environment, and requested emergency injunctive relief, including 1. Immediate suspension of all discharge operations. 2. Court-appointed environmental remediation oversight. 3. Mandatory facility upgrades under federal supervision. 4. Potential operational takeover if compliance couldn't be achieved within 180 days. My father fought it, hired expensive lawyers, argued that shutting down the facility would cost thousands of jobs and devastate the local economy. The judge, a federal district court judge named Patricia Morrison, was unimpressed. "Mr. Cross, your facility has been poisoning a public waterway for over a decade while lying to regulators about it. The economic impact to your employees is unfortunate, but it doesn't override public health and environmental protection. Motion for emergency injunction is granted." On April 15, 2016, federal marshals arrived at Crosstech Industrial Solutions with a court order. All discharge operations were immediately suspended. All production lines using water-intensive processes were shut down. The facility was placed under the supervision of a court-appointed environmental remediation specialist. That specialist was Dr. Patricia Morgan, one of the country's leading experts in industrial site remediation. She'd cleaned up Superfund sites, managed EPA emergency responses, and testified in dozens of environmental crime cases. She was also a former colleague of mine from MIT. She'd been on my dissertation committee. I didn't recommend her for the position. That would have been inappropriate. But when the judge asked the EPA for qualified candidates, Patricia's name came up, and Patricia knew exactly how thorough I was with documentation. Within a week of taking control, Patricia had identified 47 separate compliance failures at the facility. She issued a preliminary report stating that Crosstech would require a minimum of $35 million in equipment upgrades and 18 to 24 months of supervised operations before they could safely resume normal production. The board of directors panicked. They couldn't afford $35 million in immediate capital expenditures, and the facility was already hemorrhaging money from the shutdown. The criminal trial was months away, with potential fines that could bankrupt the company entirely. They demanded my father's resignation in May 2016. He refused. They voted him out anyway. Garrett and Helena were removed from their positions simultaneously. The board brought in an outside CEO with experience in corporate turnarounds and regulatory compliance. That CEO, Jonathan Hayes, contacted me in June 2016. "Dr. Cross, I understand you have unique insight into this facility's environmental issues. Would you be willing to consult on our remediation plan?" It was surreal. The company that had mocked my degree now wanted to pay me to fix their catastrophic failures. "I'll consult," I said, "but only if the agreement includes complete transparency with regulators and full compliance with every environmental standard." That's exactly what we need. I signed a consulting contract in July 2016. $250 per hour. Estimated 1,000 hours of work over the next year. More than I'd made in total salary as a DEP inspector. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in my family. The criminal trial began in September 2016. I testified for 3 days. My father sat in the defendant's chair, staring at me with an expression somewhere between hatred and disbelief, as I walked through every violation, every falsified report, every deliberate choice to prioritize profit over public health. Dr. Cross, his defense attorney asked during cross-examination, "Isn't it true that you targeted this facility specifically because of a family grudge?" "No," I replied calmly. "I targeted this facility because it was committing environmental crimes. The fact that it's owned by my family is unfortunate, but it doesn't change the chemistry of the contamination. But you benefited from exposing these alleged violations. You've been paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to consult on the remediation. I've been paid for my expertise, the same expertise my family mocked for years. Yes, there's irony in that, but the water contamination isn't ironic, it's factual." The jury deliberated for 2 days. On October 18th, 2016, they returned guilty verdicts on 41 of the 49 criminal counts. Sentencing came in November 2016. Warren Cross, 6 years in federal prison, for $3 million in personal fines. Garrett Cross, 4 years in federal prison, $1.5 million in fines. Helena Cross, 2 years in federal prison, reduced due to limited direct involvement, $500,000 in fines. Senior engineers, probation and fines. The corporate entity, Crosstech Industrial Solutions, was fined $45 million and placed under 5 years of federal environmental probation. My mother didn't attend the sentencing, sent me a single text afterward. "I hope you're satisfied with destroying your family." I didn't respond. Meanwhile, the remediation work continued. Under my consultation and Patricia's oversight, Crosstech underwent the most comprehensive environmental overhaul in Pennsylvania's industrial history. We installed state-of-the-art water treatment systems, $22 million in new equipment that could handle the facility's full discharge capacity while meeting every federal and state standard. We decommissioned and excavated the unauthorized discharge pipe, remediated the contaminated soil around it, restored the affected drainage areas. We implemented real-time monitoring systems that reported discharge quality directly to regulators. No more self-reporting, no more opportunities for falsification. We retrained every employee on proper environmental procedures, made compliance part of the facility's core culture instead of an afterthought. By March 2017, Crosstech Industrial Solutions was operating at 85% of its pre-seizure capacity, but doing so cleanly, legally, and sustainably for the first time in its history. Water quality testing in Clearwater Creek showed dramatic improvement. Chromium levels dropped from 850% above standards to 15% below standards. Fish populations began recovering. The ecosystem started healing. And I watched it all happen from the inside. The tree-hugging PhD they'd mocked was now the expert they couldn't operate without. My father was released from federal prison in May 2022 after serving 4.5 years of his 6-year sentence. Early release for good behavior. We haven't spoken. Garrett got out in March 2020. He works in sales now for an unrelated manufacturing company. Makes about $60,000 a year. He's blocked me on all social media. Helena was released in December 2018. She moved to Arizona, changed her name, and started over in real estate. We're cordial when family events force us into the same room, but we're not close. My mother still lives in Millbrook. We have coffee occasionally. She's never apologized, but she's stopped blaming me. "You were right about the contamination," she admitted once. "I just wish you'd found another way." "There was no other way," I replied. "They had to be forced." Crosstech Industrial Solutions still operates. Under new ownership as of 2019, the board sold the company to a larger industrial conglomerate that specializes in environmental compliance. Most of the original employees kept their jobs. The facility is now held up as a model of environmental remediation. They give tours. Environmental engineering students visit to study the treatment systems. My dissertation is cited in their compliance training materials. I left the DEP in 2017 and started my own environmental consulting firm. We specialize in helping industrial facilities achieve genuine compliance before they end up like Crosstech. Business is excellent. Turns out companies are willing to pay a lot of money to avoid federal prison. And sometimes, late at night, I drive past the old Crosstech facility, see the lights on, see the new treatment systems running, see clean water flowing through properly permitted discharge points into a creek that's finally healing. And I think about my father's words. Environmental science isn't a real career. My not real career shut down his empire, sent him to prison, seized his factory, and rebuilt it better than he ever could have. The degree they mocked became the weapon that proved expertise isn't weakness, it's power. And the quiet kid they dismissed as a tree hugger, and he's the one who taught them that some trees have very deep roots. Here's what I learned. The people who mock your expertise are revealing their own ignorance. When they call your knowledge impractical or your degree useless, what they're really saying is they don't understand the power of specialized skill. My family thought environmental science was soft, emotional, unserious. They thought real power came from corner offices and quarterly reports. They were wrong. Real power comes from knowing exactly what you're talking about, from understanding complex systems deeply enough to expose when they're being abused, from having the patience to build ironclad cases instead of throwing accusations. They wanted me to join their operation and help them cut corners more efficiently. I chose instead to hold them accountable for the corners they'd already cut. That choice cost me my family, but it saved a watershed, protected public health, and proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't force. It's expertise wielded with precision. If someone's mocking your knowledge, don't argue, don't defend. Just get better at what you do. Master your field so completely that when the moment comes, your expertise becomes undeniable. Because the people who dismiss you today might be the ones who need you tomorrow. And by then, you'll get to decide whether you help them or hold them accountable. I chose accountability, and I'd make that choice again. Thanks for listening to my story. This is Revenge with Jan, where expertise always wins in the end. Remember, never mock someone's education. You never know when that knowledge will be used to dismantle everything you've built. I'll see you in the next one.